I've always known I was different. Growing up in a house filled with warmth and love, there was always this subtle, nagging reminder that I wasn't like the rest of my family. I was adopted, taken in by the Thompsons when I was just a baby. I had no memory of my birth parents, and the Thompsons raised me as their own, showering me with all the affection a child could ever want. Margaret Thompson, my mother, was the embodiment of kindness. I often heard her speak about the day she first met me at the adoption agency, how her heart had melted when she saw me, a tiny, fragile baby, in the cradle. My father, Peter Thompson, was no different. He loved me with the same care as any biological child. But it was Lillian, my older sister, that always seemed like a mystery. She was 3 years older than me, and while she was always kind, there was something in the way she looked at me, something in the way she smiled, that felt off. I couldn't place it then, but I always had this feeling that Lillian wasn't as sincere as she seemed. She was always playing a game, it seemed. That unnerving, cold smile, the way she spoke as if there was something she wasn't saying, made me uncomfortable. But as I grew older, I trusted her anyway. After all, she was my sister, right? It wasn't until I turned 25 that I began to feel that something was terribly wrong. I had just graduated from college and was starting to establish myself in my career. I was working hard, making a name for myself in the business world, but a constant itch gnawed at me. It wasn't even an obvious feeling. It was more like an underlying tension I couldn't shake. And the person who seemed to exacerbate it the most? Lillian. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I came home to find Lillian waiting for me in the living room. She had a glass of wine in her hand and a peculiar smile on her face. It was that same smile, the one that always unsettled me. "Sarah, I've been waiting for you," she said, her voice smooth, almost too smooth. "Lillian? What's going on?" I asked, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. Her presence always sent a chill through me, even on the warmest days. She set her glass down and motioned for me to sit beside her. "We need to talk. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something that might change everything you thought you knew about your life." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Lillian leaned in, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity one couldn't ignore. "You're not really a Thompson, Sarah. You never were." The words hung in the air for a moment, and I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean?" "I've always been a Thompson. Margaret is my mother. She adopted me when I was a baby. You know that." Lillian's smile twisted into something that almost resembled amusement. "That's the story you've been told, isn't it? The truth is, Sarah, you were never meant to be adopted by the Thompsons. You were just part of a bigger plan." I stood up, my pulse racing. "What are you talking about? Are you saying the Thompsons lied to me?" Lillian's gaze darkened. "Not lied. They kept secrets. You were adopted to secure a fortune. You weren't some innocent child they wanted to care for. You were a pawn in a much bigger game." I could feel my stomach turning. "What do you mean? What are you trying to say?" Lillian's smile widened, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Margaret and Peter adopted you for the money, Sarah. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted someone who could be used to secure their financial future. And now, after all these years, it's time for you to fulfill your part of the deal." "Fulfill my part?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What does that mean?" Lillian stood up and walked toward me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I instinctively flinched, but she didn't seem to notice. "It means you're going to hand over everything. Your inheritance, your shares in the company, everything you've worked for. Because none of it ever belonged to you. It all belongs to me." I couldn't breathe. The woman I had called my sister, the one who had been my confidant through so much of my life, had been using me all along. I had no words. No anger. Just disbelief. "You're crazy. How could you?" I started, my voice shaky. Lillian's laugh was cold, cutting through my words like a blade. "I've waited so long for this moment, Sarah. I've pretended to love you, pretended to care. But now it's all mine. The wealth, the power, the control. It's all within my reach." Tears welled in my eyes and my throat tightened. "You're my sister. How could you do this to me? How could you lie like this?" Lillian stepped back, a triumphant look in her eyes. "Because I was always smarter than you, Sarah. Always one step ahead. You were just a tool. A means to an end." My blood ran cold. The woman I had trusted, the one I thought I could rely on, had used me like a puppet. I could feel the weight of everything I had built. The trust, the family bond, crumbling in front of me. "You won't get away with this," I said. my voice low but filled with a newfound determination. Lillian just smiled, that same chilling smile that had always made my skin crawl. "Oh, I already have. You don't even know the half of it." I stormed out of the room, my mind reeling. How could this be happening? How could everything I knew about my life have been a lie? Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly, searching for any shred of evidence that would expose Lillian for the liar she was. I started piecing together the puzzle, researching old documents and meeting with lawyers. What I found sent a shiver down my spine. Lillian hadn't just been manipulating me for money. She had forged adoption papers, manipulated the family's trust, and even used my inheritance as collateral in a high-stakes investment scam. It was all laid out in black and white, a web of deceit that I could no longer ignore. It was time for me to take control. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let her destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. The moment I had the evidence I needed, I confronted Lillian again, this time in the same living room where everything had fallen apart. "I've got it all, Lillian," I said, my voice steady but cold. "The forgery, the lies, the scam. You thought you could destroy me, but you've just sealed your own fate." Lillian's face faltered, the confidence slipping away as she saw the evidence in my hand. "You can't do this. You don't know what you're doing." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied, stepping closer, watching her crumble before me. "I'm taking back everything you tried to steal. And I'm making sure you pay for everything." The authorities were called. Lillian's entire scheme unraveled in an instant. It wasn't just her fortune that was on the line. It was her freedom. She had underestimated me, and now she was paying the price. As I watched everything she'd built come crashing down, I felt a strange sense of peace. The pain, the betrayal, it would never fully fade, but I had found something more important. My strength. I had taken back my life. And in doing so, I realized that the bonds of blood didn't define me. It was my own resilience, my own will to fight back, that would shape my future. Lillian's deception had cost her everything, but it had also taught me one invaluable lesson. I would never again be fooled by those who wore a mask of love.